Hello everyone. Today there is a bit time change, so we're just going live now. All right. So I'm really glad. Welcome everyone. I'm really glad you are here today. So as people are joining in, just be fully present here. Take a deep breath in and slowly exhale a bit longer. All right. One more deep breath in and exhale a little longer. So, we have spoken over the past few days about emotional suppression, nervous system, survival patterns, emotional exhaustion, people pleasing, then how emotional numbness affects, and how many of us slowly disconnect from ourselves without even realizing it, right? Yes. And today, conversation connects deeply to all of that. Trust me, um, this will be a kind of eye opener to a lot of us. Because after years and years of adjusting, performing, surviving, meeting expectations, many people quietly reach a point where they do no longer know who they are underneath it all. And that feeling is becoming more common than most people realize. Yeah. So, I want to begin today with something that might feel uncomfortably familiar. Yes, why uncomfortably? You must be surprised. You'll get to know that as it unfolds. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever achieved something like a degree, a promotion, or reached a milestone, or relationship, or something you worked so hard for, something you were supposed to want, however, felt nothing, or worse, felt this quiet unease that you couldn't explain, even after getting everything that you wanted? Maybe you look around at your own life and thought, this should be enough. Yet, why isn't this enough? What is wrong with me? Has this questions bothered you anytime? And whether you agree or not, this maximum, you know, unknowingly or um, it does arise. However, we don't acknowledge it. That's the challenge. And here is what I want to offer you today. Nothing is wrong with you. Yet, something may have gone quietly wrong with the life you built, not because you made bad choices, because many of the choices you made weren't fully yours to begin with. Yes, we often don't agree that from birth, or say from the time we start making decisions until date, many a times the external factors actually knowingly, unknowingly influence our decisions, and we don't get to know that. And today we are going to talk about something that I believe is one of the most widespread and least discussed sources of pain in modern life. That is feeling lost, not because your life is falling apart, because even when everything looks fine, you can't find yourself anywhere inside it. Scary, isn't it? And that one word could describe everything would be, any idea what that one word could be? We often don't discuss or ponder upon those thoughts. That's emotional emptiness, that inner emptiness. In Hindi we often say na, अंदर कुछ खाली लग रहा है. All right, and for those who are joining me for the first time, I'm Ishita Bagchi. I'm a life coach specializing in emotional intelligence, a counseling psychologist, a DMIT counselor, and I also work with healing practices like pranic healing, Reiki, and crystal healing. And what my work really focuses on is helping people find their way back to themselves. And as I say back very deliberately, because most of us don't realize how far we have traveled from who we actually are. Yes, that's the bitter truth. And many of us, we still don't want to accept it. And I also help people reconnect with themselves beneath years of these emotional conditioning, survival responses, and external expectations. Because many people today are not lacking intelligence, they are not lacking capabilities. There can be an entire session on this, like what people actually lack these days. However, I don't want to get into that topic. However, here they are lacking emotional connection with themselves. And over time, when someone keeps prioritizing performance over authenticity, approval over your inner truth, adaptation over your emotional alignment, they slowly lose clarity about who they actually are. And again, I would like to say and clear it all. This is not weakness, it is often nervous system adaptation. And today we are going to understand that deeply. And let me share a glimpse of my life here. So, there was a season of my own life where a time when on paper everything made sense. I was doing what I wanted or I was trained to do. I was respected in my field. People came to me for guidance and I was genuinely helping them. And probably it started from my college. And it was not something I would say forced or influenced from my family that this is what you have to do in life. Was given that freedom in my life to make right choices for my career or for anything in my life. I had all the freedom to make the choices. However, the only thing which was lacking was to actually do those self exploration. There are a lot of tools available where we can understand what we are good at, what we can be best, what kind of personality we are. And all of this actually are very essential, and that I got to know very late. And from the college days, I have been a person who could guide well, who could genuinely help others. And I don't want to take that away. However, quietly, privately, I was living with a feeling I couldn't name. And that I realized after probably 10 years of my, work experience. When I intentionally started my journey of becoming a coach, I kind of, that feeling of flatness, which you cannot explain. Like I was going through emotions of a life that has been designed very carefully, and none of the design had been mine. Really, I mean, whatever I was doing, I was enjoying. I mean, I was doing well. However, after a point, it gave you that kind of a flat feeling that things I want to do more about it. Hence, I started coaching along with my IT career. And I also realized that, we gradually become somebody that we have absorbed so many shoulds, like so many messages about what success looks like, what a good professional looked like, what being responsible looks like. And that I had stopped asking what I actually wanted, not what I should want, what I wanted. Yes. And the moment that changed something for me was a small one. I was sitting with a journal, and I want to create an entire session on journaling. These are small habits which I would like that people should get these habits incorporated in their life at a very early age. And what I did was I wrote the question, what would I choose if no one else was watching and no one would judge? And I sat there for a long time because I genuinely didn't know. I realized I had been so well trained in reading the room, in knowing what was expected, what was approved of, what would keep the peace. That's my own voice had become very, very quiet. And that is the moment I understood what identity confusion actually is. It is not a character flaw. It's not. It's not something you are lacking. Again, it is what happens when we spend years being shaped by the outside world and never give permission to ask what lives on the inside, not being that authentic to yourself. And let's understand the core of these, you know, what actually it is. So, identity confusion was actually like what it is actually was defined by one psychologist, Eric Erickson, one of the most foundational voices in developmental psychology, described identity as something we build through a process of exploration and commitment, right? We try things, we question things, we shed the parts that don't fit, and through the process, we arrive at a sense of self that feels genuinely ours. However, here is what he also described and what James Marcia later expanded on in his research on identity statuses, a state he called identity foreclosure. And this is very crucial. Identity foreclosure is when a person adopts an identity, values, roles, beliefs, or a direction in life, not through their own exploration. However, because it was handed to them by their family, by culture, by what was rewarded, or say by what was punished. The best example that comes in my mind is that There was probably, we often hear that if a family background is of engineers or doctors, so people start believing that, okay, my kid also becomes an engineer or a doctor. And this is a very commonly used example. And I remember in my childhood that whenever there used to be these questions asked to kid, what will become, there was only two things that used to come out of their mind. Do they really know about what is doctor or engineer at that age? No, that was something, feed it to them. And I'm blessed, and I really wanted to share this, that at my place we never had that force to say that you have to do, even being, belonging to a family of doctors and engineers. I did my graduation in geology because that was my choice. And these people, don't experience a crisis. They often seems fine. That's where is the challenges. There are also another set of people, I will talk about it in the later section. They will feel like stable even because the identity they are living is coherent. It just doesn't belong to them. And the cost of that, which shows up years later, is exactly what many of you may be feeling today. A low grade sense of disconnection, of performing a version of yourself rather than living as, living your life as yourself, of achieving things that don't satisfy, of not knowing what you actually want because you were never really asked. And that is extremely crucial. Second is external conditioning, how it gets installed, like I said, right? So, how does this happen? That how do we end up living someone else's version of our life? Neuroscience give us a very clear answer to this. In our first 7 years of life, which is very crucial, the brain operates primarily in the theta brainwave states, the same state adults are in during deep hypnosis. In this state, the brain is not yet filtering or critically evaluating information. It is absorbing everything as truth. Every message your caregivers gave you about what you should be, about what is safe, what is valued, what makes you lovable, what makes you a burden, it went straight in. No filter, no questioning. It's just like software installed. And then your brain built a self concept around those messages that were installed. Not because they were true, because they were early. And the brain treats early as fundamental. That's why we often hear these lines, which commonly comes that, okay, uh, even that comes from my son often, that yeah, he's a kid of a dancer, so he'll become a dancer. So these are very common dialogues which I hear. And we as a parent, like me and my husband, we calmly always encourage our kid, become that you want, and you will explore that gradually. There is no rush, and there are a lot of ways to do that. It's not that one line will actually help them explore everything. These are certain, ongoing steps that we need to do. So, Lipton's work on the biology of belief shows us that these early programs run automatically, like software running in the background. And unless we become conscious of them, we live our entire adult lives making choices that look free, yet are actually responses to our programming we received before we were old enough to consent to it. Like I gave the example, right? How a kid would know what is a doctor or an engineer? So when those things comes out of their mouth, that means those have been installed, right? And on top of that, our social environment continues the conditioning. And that's the harsh thing. We learn very quickly which part of ourselves get approval and which parts get silence, criticism, or rejection. So we amplify the approval parts, we shrink the disapproved ones, and over time that edited version becomes so automatic we mistake it for who we are, and we don't even allow them to be who they are. And we are rushing towards it very fast. We often see, right, that whenever there is certain kids behaving in a certain way, we or say the social environment are very quick to just label them. This kid is this, and this is something extremely harmful, because this is eventually is going to make that kid believe what version of them is accepted, approved, and what version is not approved. We don't get into the mode of helping them out, giving some good direction to it. And again, this entire topic also has an in depth explanation, because many would come up saying that what if somebody is doing wrong? We need to explain them with a proper understanding instead of labeling. So, the only thing I would like you to remember, stop labeling people. You don't know how much harm it could cause. And the third one is why this is so common right now. And that's what I was saying, right? We are heading towards this very fast. And in the world we are living in today, this is not just a personal story. It is not. It is a collective one. Now, it's a different thing. People won't agree to it, and few would say openly agree to it. If you agree, I would like to type, like you all to type in the chat as agree. I would start myself saying I agree that completely. So we are living in an era of unprecedented external noise. Social media gives us a constant feed, unrelenting feed of who we should be. We just watch that, scroll it one after the other, and we start believing that everything that has been shown is true. Like what success looks like, what our bodies should look like. And it becomes so that we start hating ourselves in our own body. What our relationships should look like. We start comparing that, okay, this is how the relationship should look like. What our homes and holidays and career should look like. And this is the biggest challenge, comparing, living someone else's life, believing that everything that the social media is feeding us is true. And our brains, which are wired for social comparison as a survival mechanism, process that information as instruction without even verifying. And just imagine if a kid or a teenager or a young people who have just started living, uh, experiencing, they will not have a filter to understand what is right, what is wrong. So that becomes an instruction for them. Research from the American Psychological Association shows rising rates of identity related anxiety, particularly among these adults who report feeling disconnected from their own sense of purpose and values. And this is again not weakness. This is not some mental issue. Stop calling this as a mental issues. Today I'm becoming very little emotional on these topics because these are very scary, crucial, and these are not more discussed amongst normal people. We don't want to talk about it. This is what happens when the external signal is louder than the internal one. When we spend more time consuming other people's life than sitting with our own, we are more bothered about what is happening with someone else's life so that okay, we can adapt. We lose access to the quiet signal of what actually matters to us. And that loss, that disconnection from your own inner signal is what feeling lost actually is. Not confusion about the future. It's disconnection from yourself in the present. If this resonates, I really want people, please write agree or yes to at least acknowledge the fact. It was a little crucial discussion. Let's slow down here, and I want you to invite you to a shorter practice right now. Not a journaling exercise. As I said, I will cover it in another different session. You'll do that later, not right now. As you are here, you can keep your eyes open or soften your gaze downward. Just let yourself settle for a moment. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I want you to notice, not think through. Notice what happens in your body when I ask them. Because your body knows the difference between what it feels true and what it is merely expected. Yes, your mind has been trained, your body hasn't. So, the first question, think of a moment in your life. It doesn't have to be big. When you felt genuinely alive, present, like the time disappeared. What were you doing? Who were you with? Or say what was true about that moment. Just try to notice that. And I truly want you to truly reflect. Is that thing present in your daily life right now? And if not, when did it leave? And whose voice was it that said it wasn't important enough to keep? This is extremely crucial to ask. Second question, if the people in your life could not see your choices, if no one could approve or disapprove, What would you spend your time doing? What would you let yourself want? This is very important. And finally, not a question, but just an invitation. Place your hand on your chest and quietly, without performing it for anyone, ask yourself, what do I actually value? Not what I have been told to value. What do I truly, truly value? Take a deep breath in and exhale a bit longer. Now, whatever arose just now, even if it's vague, even if it doesn't make logical sense, that is data. That is your inner signal. That is the part of you that has been waiting very patiently for you to listen. I repeat, that's your inner signal asking you, has been waiting for long, patiently, for you to listen. Finding yourself is not a dramatic event. It's not at all. It's a series of small moments of honest listening where you choose your own signal over the noise of everyone else's expectation. Just just imagine, I have a great imagination, so whenever such thing happens, what I imagine is I'm holding a volume button and I'm trying to reduce it. So try to reduce everyone else's expectation, and then take a gentle breathe in and exhale. Another deep breathe in and exhale. So before I close today, I want to acknowledge something. What you just did, sitting with those questions even for a few minutes, that is not I would say nothing. It's not nothing. For many people, that is the most honest conversation they have had with themselves in months together, maybe longer. I could also say, it won't be wrong to say, it would be years. I also want to be truthful with you. One exercise won't undo years of conditioning. So you can't expect that, okay, just sit with this today and whatever has been piled up for years will just disappear. It can't. The voice of external expectation is too loud and it is persistent, and it has had a very long head start. What changes things, I have seen change things consistently with the people is I work with them with a continuous support. It's like sustained supported process of coming back to yourself. There is a step by step process to do that, not in one breakthrough moment. We can't do that. However, in repeated intentional practice with someone who can hold up a mirror and help you see the difference between your own choices or your own voice and the voices you inherited. And honestly, this is a very critical question. This brings up a very important question for all the parents. Isn't it better to help teenagers understand themselves earlier rather than watching them struggle with confusion years later? Because I have experienced by meeting a lot of my clients these realization many adults reach at the age of 30 or 40, sometimes beyond that, often begin as unanswered identity questions during these teenager years. And by the time many people finally realize this path never truly felt like me, they have already spent years forcing themselves through environments that drained them, building careers they feel disconnected from, or carrying emotional pressure to continue choices that were never fully theirs. And this is why guided self awareness matters, not just random advice, not comparison, not forcing decisions emotionally. And hence we complain that teenagers doesn't listen, they don't feel, they are not focused, they don't feel doing anything because they are emotionally disconnected. And helping young individuals understand themselves through the right psychological and emotional guidance is must, because identity development is not something most teenagers naturally know how to navigate alone. Hence, these disconnection, confusion, loss of focus, awareness comes into picture. And sometimes we still don't have this awareness that it's better to take guidance. Professional guidance can help them recognize their strengths, their emotional patterns, values, natural inclinations, and sense of purpose much earlier and far more clearly. There are a lot of ways to do that. Hence, if we get to do it in a proper method, that actually saves your years of, you know, discomfort. They begin building a life with greater clarity, confidence, emotional connection, and alignment from the beginning itself. This is what I do in my program, Discover My Core. It's a 6 weeks long program. It's once a week. And we work through exactly what we touched today. Extremely crucial and essential for one: identity, conditioning, meaning, and values. And we build a life that is actually oriented around who you are, not who you were shaped to be. And if what you felt in the last half hour, that slight recognition, that sense of this is about me or my kid or anybody whom I know need this, if you want to go deeper into that, I would love to work with you. The link is in my description. Book a discovery call, a conversation to understand the actual need, because the most important work you will ever do is the work of finding out who you actually are. With this, I'm ending this session. Thank you so much for being here, and I would love to hear further in the chats. Or else, like I said, book the session and we can talk more about it. No pressure, just a safe space to get help from. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.